A letter to Charlie. Let me start this off by saying I regret that I'll never get a chance to meet you in person. Not because I idolize you, but I would much rather you have a chance to respond to these words. Firstly, I am a straight, white, mostly conservative male. The only kind of person you ever respected, so you can't twist this into some sort of woke leftist propaganda. And while we're on the subject, it's wild to me that so many people label you as this protector of dialogue and free speech. As a former debater, allow me to express a few issues I have with your debate style. It's not a debate if you're constantly cutting people off without allowing them to express their premise. That's a rant, a tantrum, but I get the confusion. A real debate is a structured flow of ideas and then a response. You never gave room for any honest debate. Next rule of debate. You can't just dictate that something is leftist propaganda just so you don't have to debate the merits of an idea. That's not freedom of speech. That's weak and it's cowardly. To be honest though, that's just who you are. Now, to the meat and potatoes of this conversation. It hurts my heart that you can't answer for the things you've said anymore. No one, and unfortunately this includes you, deserves to be murdered for their ideals. Yet, in the wake of everything that's happened, I find it necessary to put pen to paper in order to address your rhetoric and the vile response from society, if only to clear my head. The first message I want to address, one of the first videos that made me to test you, you said on the subject of race, Black women do not have the brain power to be taken seriously. You've said the 1964 Civil Rights Act was a huge mistake. You've said most people get scared when they see a black person flying a plane. You've said that Martin Luther King was a horrible person. I could go on and on about all the things you've said about race, but here's my bottom line. My sister-in-law is black. I have a moral obligation to use my voice to echo hers, not to speak over her, to support her right to exist, let alone live in this country. My brother once said to my parents, living in the South in a proud interracial marriage, there are still places it's not safe for them to go just because of the color of their skin. This is the world you've envisioned, Charlie. Even worse, you've actively campaigned for hate. I cannot shed a tear for someone who would make members of my family go back to segregation if they could. You even went so far as to target professors whose skin color was different than yours. You sent your followers after them. Your rhetoric encouraged attacks and harassment against people of color. You've pushed as hard as you can to drive them out of academia, all because they held a different opinion. Fuck you. You were only a champion of free speech when you agreed with it. Were you truly a proponent of free speech, you would have encouraged these people to speak out instead of threatening them into silence. On that note, it's surreal to see your followers calling for empathy now. Wasn't it you that said that empathy is a new age leftist made-up concept? Did you ever once display empathy for anyone who wasn't a white, straight male? Empathy begets empathy, and you never displayed an ounce of it, so now you get none in return. To go further though, you loudly decreed your support for political violence when it was directed at the other side. You called your attack dogs heroes, and somehow you're surprised when that violence is directed at you? Why is there silence on the right when a Democratic lawmaker was executed in her home in Minnesota? Where was your outrage then? Hypocrites. Every last one of you. Political violence is political violence. You cannot designate one side of the aisle and say it's okay if it happens here. One more thing before I go. The amount of your followers calling you a good Christian man makes me sick to my stomach because you were so far from it. See, I was raised in a strong Christian household, and I was taught you will know them by the fruit of the Spirit. In case you need a refresher, those would be love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. You, sir, were never a Christ-like man. You've got more in common with the Pharisees than you ever did with Jesus. So let's dissect these fruits one by one. Love. You once said, the Bible says when a man lies with man, he should be stoned to death. That is the perfect law of God. You've advocated for violence your whole life. You've never shown love for God's children unless they look and think like you. That's not what God called us to do. He called us to be a witness in our words and our actions to imitate his unconditional love. You put conditions on it. Joy. You've never sparked joy in anyone, not even your own followers. You preached hate and fear. You shouted your call for division at every opportunity. You never saw the silver lining, never saw the bright side of life. You never saw the beauty in this world that your God created. You would have been one of the people screaming that Jesus is dangerous because he was spreading radical ideas, things like love your neighbor, and that doesn't appear in the Old Testament. Small correction, it appears one time. Peace. I almost don't feel the need to elaborate on this one, but show me one singular video where you advocated for peace, and I'll show you 1,000 where you actively advocated against it. You spent 31 years spewing hate and division. You went against peace at every possible instance because it got you views and it made you money. I wonder what Jesus would have to say about that. I remember Jesus calling for peace and forgiveness even as he sat on that cross. Patience. Judging by the way you've talked over every person you've ever debated, I'd assume patience isn't your strong suit. You constantly jumped on any piece of national news because you knew it would bring in views. You wouldn't even wait for the bodies to be cold before you spewed your hate. Patience was the last thing on your mind, and you stoked the flames of dissent, blaming everyone but yourself, calling it a debate. Kindness. This one is more like your defining feature. You were never kind. Not once in my life have I watched a video where you expressed kind intentions. Fear and hatred became your platform, your brand, and you tore down the pillars of the teachings Jesus laid before us. You preached your own personal, petty beliefs, and so often you spoke down on people you thought were beneath you. I could see it on your face. You thought you were better because of your race, and that's not kind. The real lie is that you were a tolerant, kind, Christ-like person. Goodness. You left a path of actions and words that stand in total opposition to goodness, and you wonder why people didn't rally in support when you died. I remember you praising political violence when it was directed at your enemies. I remember when you said black women don't have the intelligence for important jobs meant for old white men. I remember you justifying school shootings. I remember so many nasty, horrible things that you've said over the years. So much so that you will never convince me that you ever displayed even an ounce of goodness. Faithfulness. I'll give you this one. You were faithful to your mission, as misguided as it was. Maybe you were even faithful to your wife, although that part I doubt. But your actions could be construed as faithful. I don't see it that way. I see a man who turned his back on everything that Christ was trying to say. Call it what you want, but I don't like the way that hate was so on brand for you. I don't think Jesus would have appreciated it either. Still, who am I to say what faithful is? Gentleness. When I think of gentleness, images of your debates, your hot takes, and your content aren't exactly what comes to mind. You prided yourself on being blunt in the same way that a hammer prides itself on its ability to drive the point home, ignorant of the damage it's caused. I see videos of you losing your mind on college students because they won't give in to what you want them to believe. Nothing about your message was ever gentle. Not the tone you spoke it with, not the message you were preaching. You were a hate monger who loved to scream and yell. Self-control. You couldn't help yourself. Every opportunity presented for you to relentlessly tear someone apart, it's hard to argue that you had much self-control. The way you couldn't hold yourself together if anyone ever got the best of you in a debate tells me the same. You need to get your likes and views. They made you who you were. Still, I never saw you pass up a tragedy. So many videos, so many useless rants about the things and people you hate. You couldn't wait to make headlines. Now look at us. I hold strong in my belief that you are not some great Christian man. In fact, I'm pretty sure Jesus would call you a wolf in sheep's clothing, attempting to mislead his pack. You may disagree with me, but I can only speak on what I've seen. Many people out there will likely take offense to the words I've written, and clearly, this is not the most tactful poem I've ever written. Still, my conscience is clear in the midst of all of this. It was important to me that I express my thoughts. It's possible this might not be ideal timing, but real honest takes deserve to be heard. Or at least that's what you preached, isn't it, Charlie? Anything to be controversial because it sells tickets, clicks, and merch. The true worth was never in your words, it was in your content. Be honest with yourself. Is it possible that you contributed to the violence that ultimately took you out? I don't mean to throw stones, but you are not a nice person. You capitalized on pain and you preached hate every day of your life. How can I mourn someone who so vehemently hated the people I care about? I do have to state that I detest the political violence happening on both sides right now. I cannot take a strong enough stance against these political attacks. But Charlie, as a man and a public figure, I won't miss you. Goodbye, Charlie. Tommy Moss.